Both the Olympics and my HIIT challenge are over. What have I learned? Take a chance, you stupid hoe. Take a chance, you stupid hoe. Gwen Stefani sang those lyrics probably 2 decades ago now. But I come back to that sentiment often because I think that's one of the skills that I have to recalibrate in this new world we live in. To be honest, I think I have to recalibrate as an individual, but society also has to recalibrate as a whole. In taking on that HIIT challenge, I learned more about myself with regards to the structure of it than the actual physicality. That happens sometimes. Sometimes it's in doing something, the bureaucracy of it, rather than the thing itself, that teaches you the most. I use that word bureaucracy deliberately because whenever you do a challenge that has metrics for free swag, there's an inherent work-like situation that develops. Some people are okay with that, given that our society has this wage slave baked in. But I'm a rebellious one, and I've rebelled against that idea for a long time. What does that mean? In short, even if the outcome is the same, that is, I'm doing what I would have been doing anyways, the fact that I had to exercise a specific way in order to meet metrics for free swag did affect my own opinion and feeling on the exercise that I performed. Like most things, there were pros and cons. In some ways, I've enjoyed the fact that the metrics were challenging. They are as follows: 20 minutes, 130 BPM average, high intensity interval training. Left to my own devices, I would have never thought of integrating that style of cardio and even anaerobic exercise into my daily routine. But after doing it for 21 days straight, I also realized something else. When I was exercising before, I was dancing and concentrating on different performance metrics. The performance metrics were largely creative. Choreograph a new dance every 2 weeks, alternating between breakdancing and pop. Yes, I still had metrics, but they were self-defined and they were free-flowing, creative. This is actually more engineering-like, structured. And for whatever reason, I just enjoyed self-driven, self-created exercise routines more. Maybe that just says something about me. I like steering my own ship. I'm just that kind of person. The problem is that even if you're steering your own ship, there are obstacles, icebergs, other things in your way that are outside of your control. So in any case, you still have to learn to be in harmony with all the people, places, and things that are part of your story and landscape. To circle back to the question, take a chance, you stupid hoe. What does that mean in this world that we live in? This world has changed forever, just like it did post 9/11. Post 9/11, travel did become more restrictive. I was just luckily a North American, treated mostly like an American. So the travel restrictions were more in time than money. But that brings up a good point, because it seems like some people are much more willing to part with time than money, even though the former is actually more important than the latter, at least in my opinion. So, taking a chance might mean taking a chance in different ways. For example, taking a chance financially. That's the world that I think adventure travel is in right now. You can definitely travel. You're just going to have to probably pay more. In other words, you're taking financial chances. Are they worth the money paid? That's very specific depending on the circumstance. So, with travel, with lifestyle, with all that, you have to hopefully learn something about yourself and align your choices with you as a person. But the first step is maybe the harder step, because the question is, who are you as a person? In some ways, the pandemic might have helped reveal that to you, or at the very least, the pandemic has helped reveal some parts of you. But what does it mean if you find that you just were a better person overall pre-pandemic? That's going to be a hard question to answer. Part of me thinks you just have to mourn the loss and move on. You have to adapt. You have to be Madonna. You just have to reinvent yourself. The other part of me thinks you can do a waiting game, but the problem is you have no idea how long you're waiting and if what you're waiting for is ever going to return. I'm even having difficulty really summarizing the decision-making framework I'm using, because I'm yet to really know what that is. Week by week by week, especially in 2021, I've been throwing ideas out there. The last couple of weeks since I've pivoted to the high-intensity interval training challenge, I've also rested from my normal dance routine. So the last couple of weeks, the vlog has turned relatively light on dance. I've still done some easy waacking, but I've taken this opportunity to step away from dance as well. Because in doing so, I'm realizing how much I really love both the physicality and creativity of dance. So in many ways, the pandemic has forced some changes that I've liked and some changes that I've abhorred. how do we deal with all these things together? I still love adventure, and I've still integrated adventure in my own way during the pandemic. But I also love what I built pre-pandemic. And what I did pre-pandemic in terms of adventure was much easier in the pre-pandemic world. Adventure traveling, extreme sporting, and wild animal encountering were easier in the pre-pandemic world. Now, circumstances, your plans change on a dime because of something that's completely out of your control. And this something, the pandemic, has changed travel in a way that at least I've never experienced in my almost decade of doing it. From what I understand, this is the first time in modern history, at least in Canada, that we've had this situation happen. I might have to fact check, or you might have to fact check, but I believe this is the first time that the Canada-US border's been closed for this long. Closed to travel. Discretionary travel. So what does this mean? How do we contextualize it? I know I'm speaking to a very niche audience of adventurers when I'm talking about contextualizing those types of adventures, but this also seeps into everyday life, because it seems like we in the post-pandemic world or pandemic world have difficulty contextualizing risk. We're having difficulty contextualizing risk as a society and as individuals. I'll argue, and I've argued since the very beginning, even though COVID is serious, in some ways we've reacted to it in a way that's different than equally serious or more serious risks to individuals and societies. So I'm wondering where the leveling is going to be. How are we going to be consistent about this? Because what do we value more? Do we value this, that, or the other? We have so many factors that we can consider. Health, economy, freedom, so many of these things. Why is it an automatic given that any of these things should be important? I think it's actually a discussion that we should have been having from before. Maybe we'll have time to have it once the pandemic slows down. But it's a conversation that you have to have in your own mind first. So I'll start with what might sound controversial, but has been something I've been thinking about for a long time, because my mom is old. I've explained to people before that I'm very clear with her, and I've been very clear with her, that I hate responsibility. I've avoided it in all the major ways possible. Last time, it's at least the 2 M's. Mortgages, marriages. I've avoided all that. I've avoided it strategically because I like the freedom. And also the responsibilities really give me nothing in return, in my opinion. There's really nothing to gain and more to lose. What am I gaining in a mortgage? What am I gaining in a marriage? Nothing. But lost money and time. That's how I view those 2 contracts. So I've stayed out of them. But another thing that I've also been very clear is that, given my child-free, antinatalist approach, what makes you think I want to take care of any old person's ass? Nothing. I've never signed up for it, and my own mom, who birthed me, is very clear that if shit's gonna go down with her, I ain't gonna be around to be a caregiver in any way, shape, or form. That might sound mean. That might sound harsh. But I think that level of transparency has been important in my relationship with her. Because I think it's important for people to know what they bring to the table, and most importantly, what they don't. So my harsh speech to her was, I ain't gonna be that caregiver for when you lose your capacity to think, to walk, and to do basic things. But right now, this moment, about coming on a decade ago, I had the foresight to know that right now is the time if you want to do anything that requires all of those skills. Adventure traveling is one of those activities. Traveling, even in general, is one of those activities. So because I made that cogent, logical case to her, she agreed. And we did what we did. We executed. And I'm a sage oracle in a way, because I foresaw this in its own way, shape, and form. The MO, the motto, is always, do it when you're able to, when you're able to. Ability is something that you have to assess holistically. There are real obstacles and there are bullshit obstacles. The knowledge, the power is knowing the difference between the two. So, revving that around to the pandemic. In some ways, the situation I have with my mom is maybe a generational situation writ large. At least crudely summarized, the early pandemic lockdown responses can be roughly that you sacrificed the freedoms of the young for the health of the old and weak. That's crudely stated, but if someone has a more elegant way of summarizing it, they can have at it. I think it's a real question about how people feel about that. Have people asked the younger generations how they feel about that? Instead of just throwing out platitudes about how young people are lazy, young people are this, young people are that, have you asked how they feel about that response? Of course, young people have been affected in the pandemic. Young people have died even in the pandemic. But we're talking about early on when it was obviously something affecting old and weak, i.e. people with comorbidities. How do we feel about that? We were making these weighted decisions without calling out by name what they were, and maybe people built resentment. I know I did build resentment towards even my own mom. That's a difficult idea to verbalize, conceptualize, and maybe even debate. But I think as we head into making new ideas for ourselves, if we're feeling it, we should voice it. I've always been good at that. People around me will know if I'm angry, resentful, etc., etc. And those who have a problem with it can get the fuck out of my life. In the same way, though, I'm also open to hearing what other people have as grievances against me. But I often do think that they're rather light because I've purposely structured my life for people to rely as little as fuck as they can on me. That's just the way I've built it. That's the way I've built into it. So, this has been a weird, rambly situation. Have I even covered what I wanted to? Do I ever intend on covering anything, though? To be real? To be? Speaking about the tut arms, I'll do a little bit of a dance interlude and then go back to my ranting. Tuts are about 90 degrees. There's a phenomenon called duck hands, where people, instead of having the perfect 90s, scrunch up the top of their fingers in a way that resembles a duck face. So this is straight duck in it, and it's something that relatively annoys me because I think that defeats the purpose of the dance move of tutting. But this can be its own legitimate dance move. In fact, I did a version of it in my Rock and Robin dance. But that's just something that I'm noting to myself. Tutting is about 90 degrees. 90 degrees. You can tut with different joints. That's a 90. That's a 90. That's a 90. I've even tutted with my feet before. I've done foot tutting. But the point of the matter is, tuts are about 90s. Straight ducking it fucking pisses me off. Well, then back to the whole resentment question. Generally speaking, I verbally vomit out all of this and then I try to move on from it because staying in the victim mentality has gotten me nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Do I sometimes complain, whine, and bitch like a victim? Of course I do. But what I do is I offload that so that I can free myself to do all the other shit that I want to do with a clear mind. So going back to this whole generational divide, I think young people should voice it out if they feel resentment. Because it's a difficult question. In most biological systems and most other species, the old, the weak, usually are cast away because they cost valuable resources to those who might still be able to make a good go of it. Now, obviously, in our modern societies, we've adjusted for the fact that old, weak, whatever other people still should deserve a good quality of life. And yes, they do. The question is, what if that good quality of life comes at the expense of another group of people, the young and healthy? How do we make that discussion? Maybe it'd be nice to hear from the OK Boomer generation an appreciative thank you for the collective sacrifices that the younger generations have had to make. That might be nice to hear. Although that, to me, actually enters into the same realm, societal versus local. I've already been through this kind of situation with my mom. Maybe it's because I go way out there and I question what is life anyways. Why do you would assume it's a gift that is yours to bestow upon your children? The ungrateful little bitch like me calls that out because I think it's a burden at best and a suffering death sentence at worst. So many people have resentments both ways, both being children and being parents. Some parents actually regret having children but can never voice their opinions because that's taboo. Then there's this mythical fantasy of what parenting is, just like there's a mythical fantasy about romantic love. Then real people are left to suffer the consequences when none of them can actualize what they've been told by fairy tales or Hollywood or religion or any of these other lying tropes. So then what is it that people have to do? Well, first, they have to be honest and they have to call it out. So the same way I resent my mom for having me without asking, I do resent the older generation for just expecting that I should give up my freedoms for their old asses. At the very least, recognize that that was a sacrifice that people made. Maybe just recognize that. That's about it. That's a first step, maybe. Now, of course, there can be counterpoints to my arguments. There can be other ways that we can analyze the situation. But let's be real. Most of the people who are in power are those old okay boomers. And that's why I'm using my situation to tackle it from another vantage point. Yeah, I just skinned my elbow a little bit there. Alright. I think my vlog is starting to resemble the Charlie and Ben podcast. They're the guys behind Charisma on Command, and they have sometimes a rambling, long vlog where they touch on many different topics, but I think that maybe they've built an audience from the main channel, which has millions of subscribers, so people give them goodwill when they ramble and meander on these topics. I'm just doing this again to hash out my opinions. I think that when I watch back and catalog my entire intellectual journey through this pandemic, I'm going to come to something useful. But I think this is what I've been thinking, and it's important because so many people are fucking unhappy and sad and angry, and they never voice it to their perpetrators. To me, that's me and my mom. We've had at it, we've hashed it out, and we've come to a difficult but tentative understanding about where we were at mutually. But I think that's got to happen locally, between individuals, and on a societal level, because coming out of this pandemic, we've got so much going on mentally that, of course, we're going to rush out, do our things, but also to build forward to a better future, if at all. I think we got to start talking about these quote-unquote taboo subjects. In any case, okay. Peace out.